The EV tribe keeps expanding, and every few weeks we hear of new electric vehicles either entering the market or new startups or manufacturers announcing plans of bringing an EV into the market very shortly. Case in point, Audi India, which has now just come out with the e-Tron GT, the first electric sports car to come into the Indian market. Now, they've already been on a run. They've already launched the e-Tron, which was a full-bred, pure electric SUV. But now, we've got a Grand Tourer powered by an electric powertrain. So, how is it to drive? Let's find out. I do like the way the e-Tron GT looks. It conforms to all those traditional design elements that a Grand Tourer should envelop. It's almost 4.9 meters long. If you look at the hood, it extends forever. The front overhang, well, that is immense. But the silhouette, well, it is just so reminiscent. It just stays so true to that entire Grand Tourer culture. It is a beautiful car. It definitely stands out. One of the challenges with electric vehicles is weight. The more weight you carry, well, the more inefficient your battery gets. But Audi is addressing this by using more exotic materials. Now, there is a mix of high-strength steels, but there's also composite fiber reinforced plastics, and 60% of the body panels are all made out of aluminium. Various other elements in the chassis as well, they're made out of aluminium. So that gives it the required strength and, of course, the lightweightness that you would require in a car of this sort. However, in the e-Tron GT that I'm driving, I've got this massive sunroof that extends from the front to the rear. It's a single glass panel and it does not have a roof lining. And what that does is allows that surface to get heated, and that heat radiates into the cabin, which of course puts an additional amount of stress on the air conditioning system, which of course then draws additional power from the battery. And that kind of defeats the cause and the effort that the e-Tron puts into getting the best range possible. My recommendation, insist on getting the car with the CFRP roof, because that will just make your car a little more efficient. The e-Tron GT has two permanently excited synchronous motors. Now, one of them is placed coaxially over the front axle and one is lateral, or rather parallel to the rear axle. And the front motor makes about 238 PS of max power, and the rear motor outputs about 435 PS of max power. Combined, they output about 476 PS of max power. But with an overboost facility, you get almost 530 PS of max power for a short duration, just a few seconds. Now, that combination in overboost is able to propel the e-Tron GT from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in just 4.1 seconds. That is, well, serious supercar territory. It is fast. It punches a hole through any road. It is exciting. It is a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, this is an Audi. So you've got that safety net, you've got the stability, you've got the dynamic performance to really enjoy a drive experience in a car of this order. The e-Tron GT makes about 630 Newton meters of max torque, and that torque is distributed between the front and the rear axles. This is a quattro at the end of the day. Audi is well versed in making all-wheel drive powertrains, and the e-Tron GT, well, quattro makes a significant impact in this car. You get 4 driving modes in the e-Tron GT. There's the efficiency mode, the comfort mode, the dynamic mode, and the individual mode. And within the individual mode, you've got various parameters you can select. You can alter the kind of performance that you want from the electric motors. You can adjust the suspension quality, whether you want it firmer, you want it softer, and a host of other options. In efficiency mode, of course, like the name suggests, the car is at its most efficient. In this mode, however, top speed is restricted to 140 kilometers an hour. The e-Tron GT also lowers itself. You get about 80 mm of ground clearance thanks to that adaptive air suspension. When it's at its lowest ride height, the airflow over the body is also at its best. Now, Audi's engineers designed this car to have a drag coefficient of 0.24 CD, which is quite slippery. So interestingly, for a Grand Tourer, I'd expect to have seen the range mode in the e-Tron GT as well, like I did in the e-Tron SUV. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a range mode, and what range mode essentially does is switches off a few of the electronic systems that are unwanted and that would sap power from the battery. However, the e-Tron GT does not have the range mode feature, which means you just have to rely entirely on your driving skills to make sure you extend battery range as far as possible. The exhaust note that is artificially fed through the speaker system, well, it is quite interesting, quite invigorating, and of course quite futuristic. It's a proper Back to the Future kind of note with those synchronous motors building up that whiz. I tell you, this car is just phenomenal. Shifted into dynamic mode and it's just so much fun. Being a Grand Tourer with very sporty intentions, you'd expect the range, well, to fall short. But the e-Tron GT, well, it's not too bad at all. Audi claims you'd get upwards of about 450 kilometers in ideal driving conditions in efficiency mode. These are WLTP driving cycles. In the real world, I'd bring that down to a little under 400 kilometers of range, which is not too bad. So 100% charge on the battery should comfortably give you about 400 kilometers of range in urban conditions. You get a standard 11 kilowatt Type 2 AC charger along with the car. Audi will fit a wall box unit at your home, and that will charge this 93 kilowatt hour battery in roughly about 8.5 hours. Now the e-Tron GT, it's also compatible up to 230 kilowatts. So a really high speed, a supercharger would give you about 80% of charge in just a little over 20 minutes. The recuperative system in the e-Tron GT, well, it's got 2 levels of recuperation, and interestingly, this isn't as aggressive as what I experienced in the e-Tron SUV. So even if you go down to level 2, which I am in at this point in time, the motors are charging the battery, but the braking effect, well, you just don't feel that as strongly as you do in the e-Tron SUV. And that's a nice thing to do. In addition, even when you take your foot off the throttle pedal, coasting further charges the battery. Another way to recharge the battery, of course, is to step on the brakes. And up to 235 kilowatts of energy can be generated from braking, which means you can recuperate a significant amount of charge if you are going downhill and using the brakes more often. Incidentally, the e-Tron GT, well, it gets normal steel discs with run-of-the-mill calipers. It's a 6-spot caliper, but they're just the standard versions that you'd get on any of the Audi fleet of cars. The e-Tron GT RS, now that gets tungsten carbide, and that braking is far more efficient. Cooling is better on those brakes, and of course, as a result, recuperation must also be better. The e-Tron GT that I am driving right now, this is the car within the press fleet, and this comes with adaptive air suspension, and it works pretty well. Ride comfort is fantastic. However, the way to get the most out of this air suspension is to go into individual mode, set the motors or set the engine performance on efficiency, And the suspension setting on dynamic, it may feel a little firmer, but because this is a Grand Tourer, if you are in comfort mode, there is a lot of give in the suspension, and on certain undulating surfaces, I could feel the rear end bottoming out, which can feel a little painful at times. Audi's e-Tron GT, well, it's a brilliant car, but I'd say it's almost 7/10 there because, well, 3/10 I'd reserve for the RS version, which is the more powerful, more dynamic variant of the, well, e-Tron sports car. The GT, well, if you look at it, it's gorgeous. It's got fantastic ride quality, it's got good performance, but until the infrastructure is set up in India, you really can't take a Grand Tourer on a Grand Tour. And of course, that's the only sore point about this. It is a car I'd love to drive around the country. Unfortunately, I still can't do that.